welcome. Hi, I'm Laura Rogers, Microsoft MVP, and this is SharePoint Power Hour. This week I have a guest here in person with me for Power Hour, Nick Bertoli. He lives here in Birmingham, and he also goes to our SharePoint user group here in Birmingham, Alabama. And he's got a great presentation on identity management. And so we've been having a good time getting us all set up and getting us both fitting in front of the green screen and all situated. So just a little bit of information before we get started. We have a Slack channel, and we have in the description of this YouTube video, there is information on how to get into the Slack channel and chat with us. And I've actually got my Surface in my lap that I'm going to be typing in Slack while he's doing the demo on the computer. And so again, as usual, this is live, and the whole reason that I do Power Hour Live is to be able to have it, be interactive and have chat and have a discussion about things. So Nick's presentation is going to be about identity management, and he he catered it towards more the typical audience for Power Hour, which is more business users. And we do have a good bit of, technical people and server engineers and things, but that's kind of what I've always kind of kept the business users in mind, even though I have a technical background too as a server admin. But I'll go ahead and I'll turn it over to you, Nick, and you can get started with your slides. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks everybody for having me here. So like she said, we're going to be talking about identity management today. Before we do that, I'm going to do the boring about me slide.
Oh, I think we got to flip the other thing over to the slide, over to the screen
Oh, we
share.
sure do. You are correct.
So go here and then click scene 2. There we go.
There we go.
Awesome.
Okay, now everyone can see that. I cannot see. I lost my presenter mode though. There we go. Okay. So, like she said, we're going to be talking about identity management today. Before we do that, really quick about me. Hate doing this part, but I am an independent SharePoint, Office 365, and Azure consultant. I run my own company. Actually have some minions now. My company is called Bertoli Enterprise Consulting. You can get a hold of me via these ways that are on this slide over here. And I'm also the collab365.community community manager. And that is a site that is just full of content like SharePoint, Office 365, Azure videos and blogs, and there's forums and stuff. If you're familiar with SharePointCommunity.net, that actually switched over to this. So it's pretty big. I hope you guys check it out. There's going to be lots of videos, including this one even. Identity management. Since this is kind of a SharePoint-focused show, I wanted to start with SharePoint. As everyone knows, the user profile service is a huge pain sometimes getting it set up, but it's very important. It basically it provisions and it stores your user profiles. It sets up your My Sites. If you're in Office 365, you have a Delve profile instead, but there still really is, there's some stuff going on in the background that still handles your users, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. It's that thing where you forget to give replicate directory changes. Whenever you set that up, the sync service is always so hard to get started, and probably 8 times out of 10 it's because you forgot to give the account that runs your user profile service replicate directory changes in Active Directory. Keep that in mind. If you have one takeaway from this thing, it's do that when you're setting up the user profile service. And it's those two components, right? So zooming out a little bit, SharePoint has to get its users from somewhere. And usually by default, it's going to be getting all your users from Active Directory, right? The sync service goes in there and it'll pull it. You can even write back to it, though best practice these days is now to do the one-way sync. You actually run into a lot fewer problems.
That two-way sync came out a few years ago, what was 2010? Mm-hmm. And then I saw it used here and there, like especially for photos, but I didn't see that many people letting end users edit things for it to be two-way,
Yeah.
And now it doesn't exist anymore, right?
No, and I think it was still an option in 2013, but I didn't really use it either that way.
Yeah.
Because it always blows up. So you're way better off using the one way. It was a good idea for Microsoft to make that the best practice. But what you might not know about the user profile service is it can take users from a lot of other places. So you can feed into it with Active Directory Federation services, which we're going to talk about later, or if you've got like some weird Linux LDAP provider or third-party identity management programs, also that we're going to talk about later, you can feed into that. And I don't have a slide for it or a pretty graphic, but you can actually feed from SharePoint's user profile service to other apps and have that do that. One of the apps in this big project I'm working on right now actually does that.
Is it like something like PeopleSoft? Because I've seen people take PeopleSoft and pull it into Active Directory.
Yes, so I'm going to be talking about that in a second. So PeopleSoft can feed into Active Directory, but you can actually pull the user profile service and have that do that. It was so weird. I was meeting with these app owners to talk about that, and I'm like, all right, well, do you want single sign-on? You want to hook straight into Active Directory? And they're like, oh, we just hook into SharePoint's user profile service. It baffles my mind that you could even do that. I've never seen it done before, but apparently it's something you can do.
Yeah, it's always kind of a balance, I guess, to figure out where you want it to come from and go to where and what the most efficient way is. Because if you have a central place like PeopleSoft where it all starts from, if that's your process, if that's where HR is putting all the changes in, then you want it to go from there out. But if you have changes being made over here sometimes, and then it gets kind of tricky with.
Yeah, and that's kind of a big theme of this presentation, is trying to manage your users in a more efficient way than that. So, all right. So let's start talking about what a user profile is. I'm sure all of you guys know this, but there's a lot of beginners coming to the scene these days. So I'd like to start small. So a user profile is just a chunk of data around your users, right? You've got a username and password, your email address. You've got a couple little things in there, like the immutable ID, which is something that Office 365 really cares about. And then, of course, you've got your user principal name and your SID, which you can use as identifiers when you're setting up ADFS. And of course, your group memberships, which is very important. So things to consider when you're setting up how you want your user profiles to work is, what kind of common user roles do you have in your organization? Because chances are you're only going to have so many that you use, where, okay, maybe we have some field guys, they're all going to need a cell phone and a laptop. Maybe they need these permissions on SharePoint. You should take all of that into account from step one of your users. Like you were just saying, there's PeopleSoft. HR is probably going to have some sort of onboarding process when they bring new employees in, or if there's any changes. They need to have a set process of, if this user is this role, they get these things, and if they need any special permissions, that maybe there's a form that you can fill out to get approval or whatnot. You can use workflows, or you can do it in PeopleSoft, or whatever you do to keep track of it. Please don't say you do it with email. I hope you have some sort of HR system. But just, you really need to consider those kind of things when you're doing that. So after you go through the HR process, the users are going to end up somewhere. Hopefully this is all automatic, but the most likely place they're going to end up is going to be Active Directory. And as all of you probably know, Active Directory is where all your users and devices go. Hopefully at your company, they're not all going into one spot in a big jumble of things that you can't organize. But sometimes it just happens that way.
Yeah.
They've got apps that you can use now that help you with that. If you could see me pointing, I can see that she's wearing a Hyperfish shirt.
You guys check out Hyperfish. It's a fairly new company. We can talk about that later. But yeah, it's very helpful for AD specifically. Yeah. Yeah,
but Active Directory is very powerful. You can integrate it with almost any application that comes out. If you build a custom app, you can probably have it hook into your Active Directory. You might have users spanning from multiple domains and multiple companies inside a giant conglomerate. You can do trusts between other companies' Active Directories. So if you want it all to flow through one place, you can do that. It can get really complicated really fast, but it's really nice because it's all in one spot. You can enforce your group policies, meaning what programs people have access to, and what their internet settings are, and anytime something comes out, you can push it to everyone all at once. So it's very important to pay attention to your Active Directory. You need to keep it maintained. There's probably...
We could have a whole power hour about lecturing people on keeping Active Directory organized, right? And OUs.
Yeah,
And
yeah, you really
yeah.
should. Just because it can get ridiculous on doing that. You need to consider your HR process around it when you're building your Active Directory.
Yep.
You need to understand that there's probably going to be expansion in the future. So when you're setting up your organizational units, you're not just putting users. You might want to have it by your locations or by roles, which of course you can do with groups as well.
Let me move this over here.
Sure.
Don't mind me. I'm just going to move our pictures over here because on the YouTube thing, it's like behind something else. Anyway, keep talking.
Sure. But yeah, you just want to keep your Active Directory really pretty and organized and maintained, because this is going to act as the source of truth. If you're doing single sign-on and you've got a bunch of apps and you want your users to be in one place, Active Directory really is your source of truth. And so if you have people that are moving around within your company and you're not changing their Active Directory stuff, your company directory is going to look wrong. If you're on SharePoint, you've got one of those. Everyone wants one of those. But if you're not keeping track of that stuff, it's not going to be helpful. So just, if you have any sway at your company, ask them about it.
And I remember when I first got my MCSE certification back in like 2000, like right when Active Directory was invented, when it first came out. And they teach you all that when you get your certifications. They teach you all the proper ways to do these things. But I mean, I guess if you're an engineer that you just kind of get thrown into this role and you're just all of a sudden you have to figure out this AD thing, there are a lot of just little things and little best practices in there that just aren't the most obvious. So I highly encourage you to, if you don't go get your certification, but at least study up on.
Yeah,
on
Active
that.
Directory applies to so many different parts of IT that, I didn't even know what it was called back when I first got into the scene, but I apparently had been using it for a decade already, just because when I was in school and everything, we were using Active Directory. Users and computers is what I called it, not realizing that it's a whole thing. So the more you know about Active Directory, regardless of your role, the better. Even if you're just a regular end user, you should know kind of how your profile
Yes.
works.
And how complicated it is, and be patient with your IT people.
Yep. And speaking of which, there's other things you can add on where, Active Directory is your source of truth, but it doesn't necessarily have power like access rules or anything like that where you can, it's kind of hard to explain. You can't federate Active Directory to other places, right? You can hook it into different apps from everywhere, but you don't have the same kind of power you can do by, like, as we're talking about, Active Directory Federation services. You can see here from this little graphic that Active Directory feeds into it, and then all your apps can hook into it. And that Active Directory Federation services, if you haven't heard of it before, not everyone uses it because it's kind of
Is this for when you
costly.
have Office 365? Is that what you have to use?
You can,
Or-
yeah, if you want to do single sign-on, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, if you want to have your Office 365 hook into it, you can. But really any apps. If you have a custom app that you've built, and if it takes a SAML 2.0 or a WS Federation token, you can make it work. Sometimes you kind of have to brute force it. But what it does is you basically create what's called a relying party. So each app has its own relying party. When you hook it up to Office 365, it creates one for you. But it's basically, if you go into Active Directory Federation services, it's just a list of all your apps that are hooked into it.
Okay.
So each one has its own rules and its own mappings. So you can map whatever attributes the user profile has in your application to your Active Directory profiles.
So even if you don't have Office 365 or you need to do a hybrid, you could still use ADFS for just between AD and other apps in your
Yes.
organization. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can still see the background image back there, but you can actually hook cloud apps straight into this. If you don't have Office 365 and you don't want to use Azure AD that we're going to talk about in a little bit, you can hook cloud apps into it as well, as long as your ADFS is accessible from the internet and your cloud app takes those kind of tokens.
Cool.
I've done it with like Chronos and Tableau. Tableau's, I did the on-prem version, but you can do it pretty much any app and completely cut all the cloud stuff out if you really want to keep that control there. So it comes with every version of Windows Server. I think from like 2008 and beyond. I think actually no, even before that, because I think 1.0 was in like 2003. But every time you get the newer version, you use a Windows server, the newer version of ADFS you're going to get.
Oh.
So they actually just came out with the new version in Server 2016 that has a lot of cloud stuff added to it and multi-factor authentication, which was already there, but now it's more advanced.
So then you have to go through an upgrade process on that?
Yeah,
Do you need to have a whole
I would just
separate
build.
test
I would just build a
domain?
new one.
Oh,
Yeah,
build a
you
new
just
one?
build a new
Okay.
one and kind of cut it over. Just because the changes between them from like 2.0 to 3.0 was leaps and bounds. Like the way that you could change your login forms and everything changed. You can migrate it, which I attempted to
Like
do.
Forms-based authentication? Is that what you mean by
Yeah,
login
yeah.
forms?
So it has its own form in it.
Oh, okay.
So it has a form in there. I would show it to you because I used to use ADFS, but because of one enraging morning, I no longer do. But you do.
You threw it out the window.
I did. I threw it out the window. I was so mad. But yeah, it does have its own form. You can customize it. It used to be that there was like a web server that would run, and you could go in there and change the web pages and stuff. But now you use PowerShell commands, and you just interact with it directly. There's not as much you can change as you used to be able to. But it's not too bad. All right. So that's for your on-prem stuff. If you'd like to keep everything on-prem and you only have a couple cloud apps, ADFS is definitely a good way to go. Mainly because those relying parties let you put access-based rules on them. So, for example, if you're an international company and you don't want somebody from like China to be able to access your stuff at certain hours, or if you've sent someone to China and you don't want them to be able to hit it, you can do that. You can do time-based access. Just all kinds of things.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, most of the rules I've ever had to write were about location. They want internal, like if you're on the network, you can see these certain things. You can log into these apps.
Oh.
If you're outside, you can't.
And what's the interface for doing that? PowerShell?
No, you actually do that inside. Like if you go to Server Manager, Active
okay.
Directory Federation Services gets its own kind of app that you can do that.
In MMC, the
Yeah,
management console? Okay.
exactly. It's like an MMC. I don't think Snap-in probably has one though.
Okay.
I just go straight from Server Manager. It's actually pretty easy to do. You can use like regular expressions to write your different rules.
Oh, nice.
And you can get really complicated with them because they stack and they go in the order that you set them in. So you can do a deny all and then but stack some other ones above it.
Oh, that can get tricky.
Yeah, it really can, and you can do that for each app. So some of your apps might be more important than others. So if you think about doing that, if you have that kind of need, ADFS can do it for you. It's going to take a lot of work, and I'm going to talk about the costs that come along with that.
Besides the cost of getting frustrated and wanting to throw your computer out the window?
That was the biggest cost, honestly, because if you already have the licenses, it's free with Windows. But yeah, that's one of the
sanity.
costs. Your sanity is always a cost in any IT project you do. So next thing we're going to talk about is Azure Active Directory. I hate pronouncing it like that. I know the color is Azure, but Microsoft calls it Azure. So let's talk about that some. Azure Active Directory.
Azure versus Azure?
Yeah, because Azure is the color blue, and it's the color scheme that Azure is based off of. Like, I don't know. So anyway, you can see from this image that this big logo, that little pyramid, is the symbol for Azure Active Directory, and it is made to hook into all kinds of things. I'm going to do a little demo of it, actually probably right after this slide, because my notes said that I'm going to do that. But you can hook all kinds of stuff into it. Windows 10, actually, you can't join Azure Active Directory like it's an actual domain, but with Windows 10, you can actually join your devices and stuff to Azure Active Directory.
Directly with your Office 365 login.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Well, because yes, let's actually show you some stuff about it. Yeah, so it's online Active Directory. It connects to a bunch of cloud and on-premises apps. And you're right, Office 365 uses that. So if you go to your users inside Office 365, whether or not you're syncing them from your on-premises, Azure Active Directory is where they live. All right.
Tony says, I wasn't involved with it, but we just got single sign-on set up with AD to ADFS for current use to enable logging into Office 365. More will be added to single sign-on. We're starting to get our feet wet with Office 365 a lot more.
Yep, and that's exactly what you do. That's why I'm building it this way, because it all flows together just like that. Because, again, you want it all to go back to your single source of truth, which is Active Directory. Right? So this Azure Active Directory is great. I know they're doing all kinds of stuff to where eventually you may not even need an on-premises domain anymore.
Oh, interesting.
Because they've got domain services they're starting to add in there. Because this doesn't do any of that, but they are building some cloud
group
domain
policy
services.
and stuff?
Yeah. Not necessarily group policy, but
Because how would you do group policy without a
That's-
domain on-prem?
that is definitely above my pay grade. I'm sure the geniuses
That's the
at
first
Microsoft.
thing that I think of when I think of.
Yep. Yeah, because it really could. You could cut out so much infrastructure if you could do it that way. But it's got great features. It's got what's called an application catalog. So there's 2,600 plus pre-configured cloud apps. So you would just, and I'm going to show you in a second, you just go to that application catalog and you pick your application, you fill in some basic information, and you are connected. Your users are now synced. You can do multi-factor authentication, which you could do with Azure with ADFS as well, but
Is that like when you log into your webmail and it
Calls
makes
your
you? Okay.
yeah, it's like, hey, you get a text or it calls you, or you have to get an email link. You can figure what it does there. So it's much more powerful in Azure AD than it is in ADFS. So honestly, even if you're using ADFS, if you do single sign-on, you can use the MFA from this.
Oh.
Which
What
is
I want to
nice.
figure out how to do is to make my login for Office 365 picture changed. I want to put my fancy logo. So that's
I'm
cool.
going to show you that actually in a
Oh,
second.
really? Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
because you can do that.
You could just do it in my tenant while we're here.
Yeah, sure, why not? It doesn't take that long. It's only a few hours. It also has, it recently added those access rules like ADFS has, like a month ago maybe, which is very helpful. You can do external organizations as well. It's not quite the same as how you would do it with Active Directory. And you can even do consumers, which is really fun. So I'm going to show you a demo really quick, kind of what this looks like, if I can find where it is. Okay, so everyone's familiar with this Office 365 login screen. I'm going to start typing in my name, and I'm going to hit tab, and you can see now it's got my logo up there. And it's changed, and you can actually change the stuff on the left, that image, and you can put little like blurbs in there of things that you want to do. So I'm using, I guess I'll tell you in a second, but I'm using this new version of single sign-on right now because I got really mad at ADFS and I was like, I'm done. So I am getting it kind of a single sign-on experience, but I'm not using ADFS anymore.
Oh.
So I'm going to go ahead and log in here. And I put my password in wrong. I'm probably still going to do it wrong. Okay, great. So nothing special there.
Oh wait, we got to share the screen again.
Oh, are we not sharing it anymore? Oh no.
Oh, we are.
Yeah,
okay.
we are. Yeah, we are.
I didn't see you flip it back over.
Okay, great. Yeah, we've been there for a minute, I think.
Okay.
Okay, so this all looks familiar. I'm going to get out of here and really go to the admin stuff just to kind of show you what Azure AD looks like. When you're in this admin portal, which probably looks pretty familiar to most of you, I can't see where I'm going. I think it's not under users. It's like way down here somewhere. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to see
Yeah,
over
the
this
microphone's
microphone.
in the way. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
What are you looking for?
Right here.
There. Oh, that.
Azure AD. So.
You know, I always dig all the way down in there to get to Azure AD. There's got to be
There is.
just a
Yep.
URL that I don't know off the top of my
There
head.
is. So there's two of them. There is portal.azure.com. Brings
good to
you
know.
to the new one. And I should already be logged in. That's what the new portal looks like. And then there's also this one over here, which is manage.windowsazure.com.
Oh, okay.
And this is the one that you want to use for Azure Active Directory.
Oh, good to know.
It used to be that you could only use this portal for Azure Active Directory, but they brought it into the modern portal. However, you can't do all of the same things that you used to be able to do, like that you can still do here. So I still just use the old portal because it does a lot of things. So you can see in here that I've got a couple different directories. I've got this one called ADFS. That's just like a storage account. I don't know what I was doing with that. But I have my
Mine's
directory
got like
right here.
15 things in there called test. You know?
Yeah,
Test
I
one,
had to
test
clear
two.
that out because I had that same kind of issue. So this looks very different than your regular on-premises Active Directory. But it's very easy to get through. You know, if you want to add a domain, you can add a domain. If you want to integrate with your local directory, you can. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. And you notice it says get Azure AD Premium. It's because Azure AD has different flavors. So you can get different licenses and you get different features based off of what you get. There's the free version that you just get if you're using Office 365, and actually you can get it without Office 365. You can just have it. I don't know what you're going to do with it if it's not hooking into anything, but you can do that. But then the premium features gives you way more. You can do like group right back into AD. You can get all of these, like there's monitoring and stuff, which they've actually pushed out a lot of that to the free version now.
Ooh, nice.
But yeah, there's monitoring you can do. I don't even remember all of the different things it gives you, but there's a lot of things you can only do if you have the premium licenses. And you have to have one of those for each user that you want to have those features. You can't just say, oh, I got premium now. It's these users are premium, and everyone else still has the regular one.
Oh, okay.
So you can cut costs that way, though, because not everyone necessarily needs those features. All right. So another thing I want to talk about while we're here is the fact that you can add what's called those external organizations using what's called the business-to-business feature, or B2B. And the way you do that is if you go to, I want to say it's new. Actually, I take that back. It's under your users. So under your users, you can, I want to say import. Yes, you can. So when you go to add a new user down here, you can instead get a user from another Microsoft Azure Active Directory.
Whoa.
And that's what the B2B features are. Right.
Okay.
So you can put in, you can go from there. I can do one user at a time and give them a role. And that's actually how I got this, because my Microsoft partnership is through my old email account before I started my company. But I was able to combine them doing this.
Oh, nice.
I basically pulled the directory from one and then switched it into my primary. Like, it was.
Who do you have a directory of, though? You have a small company.
It's me and like 5 people. I mean, most of these are service accounts. If you see on there, couple minions here and there.
So I never bothered setting it up because it's small company.
Yeah, but it can be helpful. So this other one down here, users in partner companies, is even better because it just asks for a CSV file. So what you do is, I'm not going to go through the whole file or anything, but I do have a video out there on the internet where I do. But you basically get an Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of fields on it, and you just send it to whatever company you're working with that you want to have access to your system. They put all their user stuff in there. If they don't, and then you put the CSV file in and import it.
So then is it static?
Yeah, kind of. So it's not the friendliest, but it means they manage their own stuff. So if they take their user out, their user no longer has access to your stuff. You don't have to remove them from anything.
Oh. Okay.
So the nice thing about that is, if they don't have Azure Active Directory already, when I import this CSV file, it will send them an invite and say, hey, you need your own Azure Active Directory for your users to do this. And it sets them up.
Oh, okay.
And so you don't have
That's
to worry
helpful.
about all of their stuff, which is, I think, the main reason they did this. So it's really nice if you've got other companies that you work with and you want them to have access to your SharePoint, rather than using the sharing feature, which, as you know, breaks permissions and all that good stuff. You can use this.
Sharing has been changing a lot lately, hasn't it? We did a SharePoint Power Hour, a whole one about external sharing, and like the next week it all changed, and it's like.
Yeah, and so this lets you do all of them at once. You import it. You don't have any stress on your side. It might stress out your business partners to do it.
So with external sharing, you could say maybe only allow me to share with certain domains, and you could set up certain domains. But with this, you could just tap into and have that whole list of users from the other domain and not have to like manually add them anywhere.
And
Okay,
in the
so-
CSV file, you can tell what apps, you can do the app IDs and tell what apps they have access to. So if you've got Salesforce or Box or any of that other stuff, you can give them access to that, and only what you want them to have access to, straight from the CSV file. Or you can, of course, do it after the fact as well. So it's very powerful. I've never actually seen it in the wild. I only know this because I've been like doing the research and I played with it for a while, but it is pretty cool. It's been out maybe a year or so.
What's it called?
Business to business, or
okay.
B2B.
Okay.
All right. And what I want to talk about next is even more fun for some companies. I guess I need to go back. You can see I have a separate tenant up here, or a separate directory called Bertolli B2C. That stands for business to consumer. And what that allows you to do, and I'm not going to go through how complicated it is to do it, but say your company writes apps or you've got a WordPress site or something where you want people to be able to make their own user accounts or log in through Facebook or LinkedIn or anything like that. B2C is another directory you create inside Active Directory.
Is that where we would have typically in the past done forms-based authentication?
Kind of, yeah. You can do it kind of as that.
Like usually you'd have to get a developer involved, and you have to write some custom forms-based authentication.
You still kind of have to do that, but it's got. If you've ever done any custom apps like in Azure where you have to register the app and it gives you like ID numbers and stuff that you plug in, this does that. So you register your app and then you register it as a B2C app, and then in your code you plug it in of talk to this. Of course, I'm not a developer. I made it work with like if you go to the TechNet article about it, they give you a sample, and I got the sample to work with my very, very limited knowledge of development. But basically, you just plug that stuff in there and you're good to go. You don't have to build anything from the ground up. You tell it, all right, these are the fields I want in here. There's a pile of fields you can pick from, and you can make your own. You can turn on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever you want, and they make their own account, and you're good to go.
Huge.
Yeah, I know someone recently got it. He's basically my Indian equivalent, and he has a WordPress website that he just got working with B2C.
Oh.
And he's not a developer either.
Fancy.
He got to work. He is an Azure guy though, so it worked out for him. But yeah, it's really cool. In fact, Fausto, Josh G. So Josh G did it.
Could that be used in conjunction with like external users in Office 365, or would that be like more with your on-prem 2016 farm?
So it's not really for your like business apps. It's for your custom apps. Like if you made.
Oh, not for like SharePoint. Okay.
Yeah. You wouldn't send someone into SharePoint with that. Although that would be really cool. I really wish you could do it with Power Apps. You can't. Not that I've seen. But man, just think if you could hook that into Power Apps, you could make commercial apps like nothing. You could just pump them out. But that's not a thing.
Tony Wilson says B2C sounds cool. Yeah,
yes,
it does.
It is very cool. I felt so accomplished making that work on the sample. Because again, I'm the worst developer in the world.
Are there references? I think Microsoft's been putting out a ton of videos just in the past year or so on Azure and how to do things in there. Is that kind of
I learned how to do it off the TechNet article. But yeah, I'm sure you can learn from like Virtual Academy or the 10,000 other places they're putting out. Channel 9 probably has some stuff about it. But yeah, it's really cool. If you guys don't have any questions.
Nope, he just said it's cool.
Yeah.
Fausto said he's going to chat with you about it later.
Okay, great. So yeah, there's so much more to Azure AD. One last thing before I switch to how to get your users here, because you can do it just from here. If you only have Office 365 and you're only using that, you don't necessarily have to sync your Active Directory users to this. You can just build them right in here. I wouldn't, but you really can. And I'm hoping that the vision is to really start moving that way for smaller companies, because as a smaller company myself, you get so much benefit from doing cloud stuff over having hundreds of thousands of dollars of servers all over the place, or even like the cost of
I log straight into my Office 365 tenant when I log into Windows, and I think that's a step in that direction.
Yep, same here. My computers die sometimes, and you don't lose everything. Put it all in one drive.
Carlos says, wow, I could have used the BTB feature a year ago for sure. With security issues, we ultimately had to issue licenses. All externally partner workers who were not in our company on several projects we had in the works. The cost of our tenant with Microsoft was extreme. Yeah, that adds up, doesn't it?
And I don't know the cost on B2B. B2B, I think, is still free. When I first messed with this, it was in preview, so everything was free. But B2C, I know, is not free. It was when it was in preview, but it's usage-based. So there would be a cost for that. I don't know what they are, and I'm sure they can get real big if you're just pumping out apps.
So next time you guys want to do that, just go ahead and ask him.
Yes. So the other thing I want to show you, I'm trying to remember exactly where it is. I think it's inside the directory, and I'm going to go to New, and I think I want to go into...
I've got my microphone right in the middle, so it's kind of in the way, but...
Yeah, I'm trying to remember where to go.
There's so much in there, by the way.
There is. It's all like... There's a new application button over here. Man, I really want to show you this. I just did it like a week ago. Marketplace? No, it's definitely not Marketplace. So there is a place where you can do, it's right here, it's under Applications.
Oh, of course.
Okay, so under Applications, and the logical place for it to be, You can see all the list of the apps that I have hooked into here. I even was trying to hook Amazon Echo into it for a while. Yeah, I really wanted to make it talk to my Outlook calendar instead of my Gmail calendar. I failed horribly.
Man.
Just because, again, I couldn't figure out how to do the middleware part. I'm like, what do I run this on? But you can do that kind of thing. But this shows you all your apps. And, you know, Office 365 is going to be there, all the individual ones.
There's this new thing called Azure Functions. Maybe that could be your middleware. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know enough about it.
I bet it could. Because all you're really doing is making a connection for that. I was trying to have that be to... Because you have to have a login if you want to use... if you want to get your calendar, you have to log in. So I had to make a login page. I was trying to do it with B2C or straight to Azure. None of it worked. But anyway, here's all my apps. And if I want to add a new one, you go to Add. And you can add a custom app, which is really cool if it can take SAML too. Just like ADFS, you could actually use your on-prem. As long as they're accessible from the internet, you can do that. There was one thing I didn't mention in ADFS. There's this file called Federation Metadata, which is probably getting too in the weeds. But it keeps track of your certificate and all that stuff. And basically, when you set either this or ADFS up with your app, you just do a handoff. Like, here's my file, here's your file, import it. Some apps are much friendlier than others. Sometimes you have to do it manually. But Microsoft has those already, they're already published. You get one for your tenant automatically, and then there's one that's global for like anyone can use. It's like completely like it doesn't care about your tenant. I don't understand what you would use that one for, but it exists. And
you're getting over my head.
Yeah, it's basically a file that says, this is me, this is my certificate, trust me, we're friends now. Let's share our users.
Thanks for explaining it.
So you can publish an application that will be accessible from outside your network. That's called Azure App Proxy. We're not talking about that today. That just gives you a doorway to put your inside stuff outside. We're going to talk about this because this is much friendlier. Everyone understands what this is. And the company I'm doing this contract for right now, they went all in with Azure AD just because of this. If you can see this, there's 2,800 now apps that are built into this. So if I want to have Salesforce have single sign-on, which is one of the ones I'm doing right now, it's actually super easy. Salesforce is probably the easiest one I've ever done. You just find Salesforce on here. You can do your sandbox or whatever.
Ooh, Dynamics CRM too, maybe?
Yep. Yeah, Dynamics. Dynamics already does it by default. It's like, well, 365 does anyway. You're on-prem, you might have to do something to it.
Yeah, but there are products that are portals, like external portals into Dynamics CRM. To be able to have like anonymous users use it. So.
So this could possibly work with that. This won't be so much for your B2C kind of things, but if you got B2B people, you could maybe push them into it. And you wouldn't really even need to do that here, I don't think. But it's ridiculous how many things you can do here. And setting up the Salesforce one, I'm not going to do it just because it takes a few steps. But basically, you sign in, you give it your login URL and your credentials, exchange a certificate that this gives you, and then you configure your app on the other side. You say, okay, use this, and importing that stuff usually does that for you. I mean, we set up the Salesforce sandbox in probably less than a day. Just getting that all in there, and they're like, all right, well, what features do you want? Because it can provision your users too. Here's your pool of users, but you can also have it make the account in your app on the other end. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So Salesforce could say, if this user is in this group, then they get an account now. They get a license. Because licensing is kind of separate from the users just being in a bucket, right?
Okay. Oh, Carlos has a follow-up, but the good feature was we had to rely on their company to send us feedback when one of their employees left the company or project. This was a nightmare to keep current on who was in our Office 365 environment. That's what you were saying, that you don't have to worry about as much. So at least the burden would have been eased somewhat for both of us, especially when we had to rely on managers to tell us rather than true blue AD admin.
Yeah, and that's I'm just going to switch back to this so we can talk for a second.
The politics behind that is always interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of the most important part really is the process around dealing with all your users in that. Because I do a lot of consulting. Like, IT departments are most of my clients. Like, they bring me in there, why is our IT department broken, or why is just SharePoint broken? And a lot of the times it's because they're not getting that kind of feedback. Hey, a user switched. Well, why don't they have access to this? You didn't switch what kind of user they are. You still said they're like a temp or something, and they don't have the access that they should have. So you really need to focus on that HR process.
Huge. Yes.
Yeah, when you're doing that. So next thing, we've got our cloud stuff, we've got our on-prem stuff. How do you make them be friends so that it's all one big bucket of users that don't care where your apps live? And that's what hybrid does. That's what this does. So next thing we're going to talk about is Azure AD Connect. And it's super simple how it works. It used to be less simple. But it's just a server that you sit on
You don't have
premises.
to have like a PhD in Azure to be able to do this now, right?
No.
It's
In fact,
click, next wizard.
it is,
Next,
and I'm
next,
going to go
next.
through that click wizard in a second.
Okay.
Because you have to have a server, and you put a program on it, and you log in. You basically log into your on-prem, your cloud, tell it what you want to do. So what Azure AD Connect does, it acts as your middleman. Oh no, I missed a slide apparently. Well, I'm just going to skip over that part. So anyway, so it's your middleman between your cloud and your on-prem. It syncs your users out there. So your Azure AD, I had a pile of users in there, same users from my on-prem Active Directory. That can do that. It can also sync your passwords, though with this new feature we're going to talk about, it doesn't have to anymore. And then it also configures, do you want same sign-on or single sign-on, which I'll explain in a second. So when you're doing this, you want to consider, do you want same sign-on, or do you want single sign-on using like ADFS or something, or do you want a different kind of single sign-on, which is the new one that they just came out with, that I'll show you. It also has, oh, I know why that's blank. Okay, so it also, you can pick which people you want to sync there. So if you want to say sync just these groups, it used to be you could only sync like one group, but now you can like pick and choose.
Oh, nice.
They come out with new versions of this all the time. It's probably been
Wait,
5
when you say
versions.
group, do you mean OU? Wait.
I mean Active Directory groups.
Groups, like permission groups or
like
a
security
distribution list?
groups.
Security groups.
Yeah.
Okay, not distribution lists.
Yeah, security groups. You can send, if you've got any custom attributes that you build into Active Directory, you need to
Not
make
Office
sure you
365
count for them.
groups.
No, definitely not Office
I'm
365 groups.
a
Yeah,
nerdy
it can get
joke.
confusing
That
though.
was a
Right?
nerdy joke.
It can get real confusing though. You also need to consider what kind of architecture you have bandwidth for and money and all that stuff
okay.
for when you're trying to decide that. This is going to make more sense when I start talking about the differences between them. So you've got same sign-on, which means that you use the same username and password that you use everywhere. A lot of people do this on their own because they just use the same password. That's bad. You want them to have one account, and then they can do that. They can use one password because it's all secure in one spot. So the pros of using the same sign-on is that all it does is a username and password sync every half hour. It's really easy. You just click through a wizard, have a server on there as long as it can see outside. You can still do multi-factor authentication because that's on the cloud side. You can have it if you want to make a password change right back to your Active Directory. You can do that with this, and you don't have to set up ADFS, which is a huge plus for me. I like ADFS enough, but the setting it up can be a nightmare. The wizard's supposed to set it up for you. It doesn't. It fails.
Yeah, I remember you did a presentation at our SPUG one time about that.
Oh no! Oh no!
Oh,
I just lost my demo that I'm about to do. I'm gonna have to.
Did it just time out or something?
It did. It timed out. All right, I'm gonna have to bring that back in a second. All right. So anyway, the cons about it is it's not single sign-on. It's a sync of your user profile sent out to the cloud. If you want any premium features, you got to pay for them. That no matter what you choose for that, that's true. And Azure AD is handling the authentication. That was a con when I first did this slide, like a couple presentations ago. It's not a big deal because they actually did something really cool with that now, which is this pass-through SSO. This is a new option inside the inside Azure AD Connect. When you're picking your configuration, you can say, password sync, pass-through, or single sign-on. This is kind of a best of both worlds. It doesn't send your password out to the cloud, so people who are worried about security don't have to worry about that. You get the single sign-on experience from like the users, the same password and everything, but it really is doing the authentication. Azure AD kind of handles it. Super easy to configure. It's just as easy to configure as same sign-on. and it's, like I said, it's best of both worlds. The cons are it's not as powerful as ADFS. You do have those like access rules that are new, but ADFS is still more powerful. It's new, so who knows where it's going to go. And the big minus to me, which is not probably a minus to anyone else, is that if you're already configured to use ADFS and you want to tear ADFS out of there, it's kind of a hassle. You have to like do a bunch of PowerShell and uninstall.
Sounds messy.
Yeah, what happened is what had happened was my ADFS, if it goes down, you lose your ability to sign in. If you can't sign into your ADFS, if a server goes down or your network goes down, you're done. All of you are locked out. Your emails are not coming into Outlook.
Oh, goodness.
So that happened to me while I was gone. My ADFS blew up. A power outage that was long enough to take out my battery backups blew up my ADFS configuration, and I'm like, I'm done with this. I'm doing the new thing. So the new version's definitely
probably
nice.
Not alone.
Mm-mm.
We had about 15 more minutes.
Yep, and we're close to done too. I think we're good.
Okay, cool.
So final thing is true single sign-on. If you can see this jumble of stuff all over the place, this is why I no longer do ADFS. There's multiple servers everywhere.
So this thing on the screen, you don't need to do it anymore.
Yeah, some big companies still should because of all the different rules you can get and how it can tie into everything. But you can really save yourself a lot of heartache and server costs because if you see,
like if you're just going to the cloud now, to just go with the other way instead of
this is cool. It's secure, and actually when you're signing into Office 365 and you type your name in, it then takes you to a second page and a second form to put your password in because that's your ADFS now. It brought you there. Don't do it if you can avoid doing it. So the pros are it is real true single sign-on. It does all of that cool stuff with the rules. It's definitely centralized. You have control over the hardware, which a lot of people are very like gung-ho about as far as the cloud is concerned. Cons are so much more hardware. You need at least 2 servers on-prem, or 2 servers inside your network, 2 proxy servers in your DMZ, so that like the outside can hit it, and then load balancers to deal with all that, and a firewall in between.
My eyes are glazing over.
Yeah, as they should, because you're like, why do I need all this? Because if one of them goes down and you don't have a backup, I only had one of each. And my one went down, lost everything. So it's just a lot more money. You have to have a person who knows what they're doing.
And it is a lot.
Sometimes it's a good idea to hire an outside consultant to do that. I might know some people. It can be a whole level of complications that you don't need. I would show it to you, but we're actually low on time, and my log me in window timed out, so I'm not going to show you what the configuration looks like. But it's a real easy wizard. There's videos and documents everywhere all over the internet. You click through
if you
4
want to
screens.
log into it, I could just edit that part out of the video later. It takes a minute.
It's
okay.
If you've seen one wizard, you guys have seen them all. It's
next, finish, done.
It's like, are you a domain admin? Cool. Here's your credentials. Are you an Azure AD admin? Put in your credentials. Cool. What users do you want? Okay. Do you want single sign-on or not?
Is that where you're using service accounts or your actual credentials?
I use service accounts. Okay. Yeah. For the especially if you're setting it up with ADFS, you can't use an account that's already in Azure AD. Because that immutable ID thing that I was talking about, they don't match. I had to call Microsoft when that happened, and we had to do all kinds of crazy things to make them match.
It's exhausting.
Oh, so much. It took me like a week to deal with it. So that's kind of the thing with ADFS and Azure AD. Basically, send your users out there, decide how you want the authentication to be done, and what kind of control you want over it. Another option that I'd like to talk about is there are third-party solutions that do all of this. You can really escape all of that. They can do this without Azure AD. So like Ping Identity, OneLogin, Okta, they all do that.
I've heard of Okta.
Yeah, and they can actually feed into each other, which is weird. One of the things that I'm doing.
In case you had like different big divisions of a company that bought different ones,
yeah.
You'd be able to,
If you went through a merger, you can make them talk. Or if you're using like a custom LDAP provider, but you want to use ADFS also, you can use Ping Federate to hook into that, and then push that to your ADFS. I ran into that on Tech Community. Someone was having a problem with it. I'm like, wow, why are you not going to AD? And they're like, we don't have AD. So you can do that. You can actually make them work together. So I had one company that they were using Ping Identity to feed into one login because the company wouldn't let them hook into their Active Directory directly with one login because you have to install a server to do that. So you can daisy chain them together, and you can daisy chain them into ADFS and Azure AD.
Hashtag duct tape.
Yeah, seriously. It's so many things, and they have similar app catalogs and all that. So if your company uses one of those, or if they're looking at using one of them, maybe there's a business reason for it. If you're a Microsoft shop, Microsoft probably has everything you need to do it. That's what I do. But all right, so that's pretty much it. Parting advice.
Good luck.
Yeah, good. Yeah, exactly.
Good luck with that.
Plan all of this carefully. Your HR process is the most important thing, I want to say, and keeping Active Directory.
The people involved, right? And them doing what they're supposed to.
Yeah, if you're just throwing everyone into a big pile everywhere, you're gonna get lost really fast. So consider all your applications. So you don't want to use those three. I had all those different third-party apps. You don't want to be using one here and one there. You want all your apps, if possible, to feed into one place.
Make it more painless for the end users, right?
Yeah, and you can automate it, which is nice. So if PeopleSauce feeds into Active Directory, and then you got your apps hooked up. So your automated process does all of it for you, and maybe you'll need one person to manage it instead of a team of people. Write policies and procedures to enforce this. So because app owners aren't necessarily going to reach out to you to do this. Sometimes they're just going to do their own thing. And
they do, don't they?
Yeah, they do their own thing, and here's just a bucket of users in this app only. Oh, by the way, we're upgrading to a new version. We're losing
the
everything.
way, this whole department over here just bought their own SharePoint farm and just built a completely new SharePoint farm in the domain where we already had a SharePoint farm. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, so
big companies have. I mean, I've worked at several big companies where you have just rogue IT apps and different things that just pop up, and so policies it's huge. Yeah,
if you have written policies, and then especially because those discussions can get heated sometimes.
They'll just go off and get a consultant, and they'll just go completely do their own thing, just rogue, not go through IT, and then just try and pop it on the network. And
next thing you know, you've got two different teams doing the same basic project with different consultants, but it's just different enough you can't merge them. So man, write those policies so that they can't do any of that without severe ramifications. It goes such a long way. And find out what works best for you. Maybe ADFS is best for you. Maybe you have someone on hand that can do that. Maybe you need that kind of control. Maybe you're a tiny shop like me where you don't necessarily need all of that. You just have to be able to get your stuff. So plan it heavily. Honestly, most of this project would be doing the planning part. I guess we can switch back to that. So that's pretty much all I have about that.
Carlos wanted you to do the demo of how to change the login screen. Oh, well.
Sure.
Is that just in the browser?
Yeah, I think it is actually.
It's okay.
Yeah.
We don't have to, but
we got a couple minutes.
Yeah,
I can do that. Yeah.
That's. We gotta share it again.
Yeah. That is done from over in your admin center.
This is one of those things where I went in there and I started to do it one time. And then, of course, I got distracted and started and then never got back to it. And I can't ever remember where I went.
I'm trying to remember, too. It's been
in Azure to do it. And I actually had found an article in, Azure documentation showing you the step-by-step. And I was following it. And now I don't remember where it was.
Yeah, I want to say it's just wherever you put your company logo. It's in your basic admin stuff, right?
No, it was in Azure. Actually.
Was it in?
Yeah.
Was it in here?
Yeah. It was somewhere in there.
Dashboard, configure, maybe. I don't think so.
I don't know.
So that's all you can do there is change the logo and the picture. Yeah. There it is, customize branding.
Oh, wow, good guess.
Yeah, so it's under configure. You can actually have separate ones. You can do it by language or whatever.
You need to go next?
Yeah, you go next.
That's a very pretty wizard, by the way.
Yeah, you just give it whatever logos, the banner logo, the square logo. You can make a dark one if you want a different theme.
I'm going to totally do that.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's actually easier than doing it in ADFS, so that's another check mark against not using ADFS. Because you can't do as many things, you can't move stuff around, but I mean, who cares? You get your logo and your branding on there, you're good to go.
So when I teach my SharePoint class, I give everybody login accounts in my tenant, so it helps to have my logo and everything come up, so it's everywhere. Yep.
Yeah, and you can even have a URL that takes them straight to your login page rather than having to go to portal.office.com and then type your name in and hit tab. I don't do it that way because I don't care, but you
Yeah.
can do it that way. Of course,
Nice.
it's still .sharepoint.com at the
yeah.
end. So yeah,
There you go. That's how you got there. And you can just rewind it if you need to see that again.
yeah,
Right.
it's real straightforward. Most of the things in here are. It's just there's so many different options that it can become overwhelming.
Carlos is just laughing. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, thanks everybody. Thanks Nick for coming to visit me in my basement. And I don't know what I'm doing next week. Everything's been kind of up in the air lately, but you guys feel free to post some suggestions in the chat window or direct message me in the Slack channel for other topics to do next time. Don't forget, iwmentor.com is my SharePoint training company. And what's yours?
Yep. Mine is birdtoley.com. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, going to
All right.
straight to my site. And remember, collab365.community for lots of videos like
you guys
this.
check out the
blogs.
new site. It's beautiful.
Yep. Including there's a, I don't know if we've launched it yet, there's going to be a Power Hour channel with like every Power Hour on it, and of course this one as well. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's going to be a good community.
Oh, and if you guys have a disorganized Active Directory and you need help with automating and organizing it, that's this T-shirt I'm wearing. Hyperfish is my favorite new company. They have an awesome product, so go check out Hyperfish.
Yeah, Jeremy Thake's there, isn't he?
He is. He
Yeah.
went over there from Microsoft, and Chris Johnson and a bunch of guys that we've known for years. And yeah, great.
Awesome.
All right, thanks
Thank you,
everybody. Signing out.